Alright, first things first, name change. Now the game has a new name, because Occupant Depravity was a little too on the nose for being a synonym of Resident Evil. As soon as I pushed my last video, I was thinking of some new names in the Discord server, and I came up with something very similar, but infinitely more fitting given the context of the story. And the new name is Focus Depravity. It'll make more sense when there's a trailer or there's a demo or the full game, but it will make sense at some point. So right after that I started working on a small backstory for the game, and this kind of helped build the overall world of Nail Game, but obviously since they're both set in the same world, it's giving context to both really. Alongside that, I've been working on small character bios. They're essentially personality guides I can refer back to whenever I'm writing something about the character. And this makes sure that the character stays consistent, but they can also grow throughout the game. When I think of an immersive game, I think of something like Half-Life 1. Immediately in Half-Life 1, you're given some context. You know who you are, you know why you're in Black Mesa, you learn about Black Mesa through the tram ride, and then you're let off and you're free to go wherever you want. And in those moments, you're introduced to so many things so naturally. There are NPCs, scientists, security guards. They all have their places to be. They can all interact with you.
You'll just have to wait until after the test.
They can all tell you what they've been doing and what you're meant to do.
They're waiting for you, Gordon, in the test chamber.
And in Focus Depravity and Nail Game, there's nothing like that so far. So a big priority after pushing out my last video was friendly NPCs. And upon realizing that I needed friendly NPCs, I had also realized that this essentially spawned in a bucket list, things that I had to do in order to get this story really going. However, all the nice progress was soon to be stopped by the infamous UK heatwave that occurred for about 1 week. I always need something to do, and I had nothing to do. It was just so unbearable for me. And so the only thing I did end up doing was writing up some documentation for the game, just in case anyone else decided to join my team. And yeah, you can see some stuff here. Not really interesting. But something weird that I did notice was that when I was writing it, obviously as the one who designed everything, it's so easy for me to, just say, oh, it's just click a few buttons and you're done. Because that's how I always plan to make things. I always try to make them as dynamic and modular as possible. But then when I'm writing it up, there's so much more that goes into it. Weird tangent, but that's what happened. So once I had implemented the first version of the friendly NPC, I had to refactor some things in terms of the AI controller and the enemy to make it more customizable on an individual level. And once I had that done, I had to figure out how the player would interact with them. Very simple to hook up into my interaction system, but I had set up a scenario where there was a text prompt bug where the text would just weirdly not go to the new line and it would just completely mess up, and I'm not sure how that bug slipped through because it was always there apparently, and I had just never created the exact scenario needed for that bug to occur. And so instead of fixing that bug, I just went ahead and remade the whole system. And looking back on it, I realized that I was incredibly stupid, but that's what happens when you're prying away at something. You make it the first time and it's not as efficient as it could be. So when I remade it, realized my mistakes, very easy going. And I believe it's more memory efficient too, but I can't confirm that. Regardless, it's way easier to debug now, so that's a good thing. So after I finished up remaking the text prompt system, I was also thinking of names and colors. The names would be for characters that are either important or extremely generic, like scientist. And text colors, well, I don't want to see the same color every single time, so I'd want to add a little bit of variety. Now the problem with this is because of how modular my text system is, I'd have to rewrite the same name, reassign the same color, and overall it's quite time consuming, and I don't want that to be the case. And so the way I got around this is by making a faction system. Now the way this works is that there's a couple of different enums. One is for the character name. You can assign a character their name and they'll be displayed on the text prompt. Their faction, which would correlate to a different color, and their type, which would determine their behavior, so a friendly, a frenemy, or an enemy. And once you assign this to a character, their text, their behaviors, all of it's all sorted out for you. So it's quite easy to use and it works. Now you could talk to these NPCs and you could kill them, you could do whatever. And that was all well and good, but the problem is they're still static. These friendly NPCs are still sitting on their ass doing nothing. Therefore, if you want any sort of movement going, you have to think of ways to get them to move, whether you want it to be random locations, scripted locations. And the first thing I thought of when it came to friendly NPC movement was, again, Half-Life 1 with the scientists. At the beginning of the game, you're walking around Black Mesa and you can always see a scientist moving from point A to point B. You don't know where they started from, where they're going to go, but they're always walking. And that makes the world feel alive. And so I began working on a scripted routine system, and if you search up U4 AI tutorial on YouTube, you'll probably see a patrol system, but I don't like the word patrol, so I opted for routines instead. Initially, I attempted to go for a spline-based approach to make the AI follow the spline, but it just gave me some weird results, and I had to figure out the kinks of it, and I didn't like it. I might try it again later on, but not worth it at this point. So I opted back to the classic vector by vector approach. And honestly, it does the trick, and I've also added in a little option to give the designer, aka me, more customizability over the whole thing. You have a choice of different variables, and the way this works is, like I said, it's vector by vector. So you add new vectors, place the 3D widget where you want the actor to go, and then within that there's a struct that basically asks you, do you want this NPC to wait on this point for a certain amount of time and then turn around, or do you just want them to keep going? And if you do want them to turn around, you've also got this little visualizer to help you understand where it'd be facing. You can rotate it using this mannequin here. It's pretty cool, honestly not needed, but I need it, so I added it. One big problem that was still present in the last video that I didn't really show off too much in general was the inventory and the combining system. As of now, it's a little bit tough to use, tough to create new recipes, and there was a bug where under certain circumstances it would just create a new item in a random spot and it would mess up the flow of things and it would all completely break down. And so I was trying to reproduce this issue for maybe 10 minutes, debugging, and I even made a hypothesis for why this is happening, and I wrote it down on my Discord server, and then I realized that it was just because I didn't set the ID of the new item slot. It defaulted back to 0 every time, and that somehow messed up everything else. I don't even know how it sometimes did work, because it shouldn't have, but anyways, that's fixed. I also went back to the camera system, and I adjusted some things here and there, and I added some new options. Other than being static cameras, I've also added the option for rotating cameras and positional moving cameras. And with each type you can lock them to specific axes so that you have more control over the exact sort of effect you want. I also worked on a camera priority system, and the way this works is that you can stack multiple different camera switching volumes inside each other, and the one that's more prioritized will switch the player's view to that specific camera. This just allows me to help highlight certain areas that I want the player to see, to notice, and overall it fixes quite a few other issues. Now, just recently I've worked on a weapon system, and I basically ported over the weapon system I made for Nail Game that is quite redundant now because the only weapon in Nail Game is the nail gun. But anyways, I ported that over and it basically works. Still got to expand on it, like adding projectiles and some other features here and there. It was quite a hassle, but thankfully it's out of the way now and you can pretty much design any sort of weapon you want. And so yeah, I'm pretty much done. Next time I'll be focusing on the friendly and friendly AI NPCs, expanding on their behaviors, how they react to certain situations in the player. And I've been thinking of adding, or at least attempting to experiment with a multiplayer mode, so maybe we'll see that in the next video. So yeah, that was it for today. I will be off probably watching cat videos.